Okay, I'm here today with Arjun Bhogal, who I heard on a podcast recently. And the reason why I was intrigued is because he walked from Wales to Australia. And I know that probably people think that you can't do that, but he did, and he's sitting there. So he's living proof it can be done. I thought this was fascinating. Most people can't walk down the street. So, kudos to you. And I'd love to first welcome you. Thanks for talking to me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Excellent. So where did you get this crazy idea to just wake up one day and be like, yeah, I'm going to do this? Or was this a lifelong thing? Or, I mean, how did this all come about? As one does, just, decide to walk halfway around
the world. Yeah. So the idea was kind of born in the kitchen of our university home when we found out about the charity water aid, and during the weeks of kind of doing some reading about them, we read about families that were walking up to like sometimes 10 kilometers a day to source their own water for themselves and their families. And we realized that we wanted to kind of do some charity fundraising for them, but we didn't really know how we were going to go about doing it. And one week we listened to we watched a video of a man who converted a car engine to take something other than petrol and was driving it around the world, and there was another couple who were cycling around the world, and we kind of said as a kind of like a throwaway line, I wonder what it would be like to walk around the world. And it kind of ended up being something that kind of snowballed into this actual event. Like a year later, we were kind of ready outside Cardiff Castle in South Wales, ready to kind of leave. So the idea was to walk from Cardiff, South Wales to Cardiff, New South Wales in Australia. And yeah, it was kind of all born from this throwaway line in a kitchen one afternoon.
Well, sometimes those are where the best ideas are born, the kitchen table or the seat of a bar. So not surprised about that. So what was the mission? Was it to raise money along the way, or how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the idea was to kind of raise funds and awareness for the charity water aid. And they work in up to, I think, 37 different countries around the world. And they help provide clean water access in communities, all around the world.
Wow. Okay. So how long did this adventure take you, and how long did you think it was going to take you? Put it that way. Let's go from like the visualization to the reality, because I couldn't imagine it until I found out. I had absolutely no idea.
So originally we set aside 3 years for the journey to take. It ended up taking 5 years, 3 months, 5 years, 1 month, and 3 days.
Okay, so how does one support themselves whilst walking around the world? How does that all happen? Because I'm sure that's what people really want to know. Did you kind of go with a wad of money and just pray? I mean, or how does this happen? How do you support yourself when you're doing all of this?
So we saved up we came up with the idea, and then we realized that it was going to be something that we had to kind of essentially fund ourselves. So as soon as we came up with the idea, we started saving. And so we saved up for a year while at university, and then we also had some sponsors come on board, as well as friends and family along the way that kind of helped us out as well. But generally the kind of expense of walking is kind of quite cheap. So like 90 to 95% of the whole journey was kind of done camping each night. So we weren't really spending any money on accommodation. So the real expense really was just food and water, essentially. Yeah. So it was
when you say we, it sounds like a few of you. Now, did everybody make it all the way through? Or
no.
How did that all go?
I'm always kind of stuck in the idea of saying we did it. And so there was 2 of us that came up with the idea, and my friend and I began in 2012. And so he walked about a year and a half with me. We had some issues with the police in Kyrgyzstan, so we ended up going to jail for a few days. Jail, he decided that he was going to.
All right, wait, you're going to have to back up on that one, but I'll let you go. Don't think I'm not coming back. Okay.
But so he walked with me for a year and a half, and then after some issues, he decided he was going to call it a day. And then 3 years later in Australia, he came back out to walk across Australia with me.
Okay, now when you say jail, maybe you should expand on that part, because I was just going to ask you what was the toughest part, but I think you've answered the question already. So I'd love to know what happened.
Oh yeah, so jail wasn't as terrible as it sounds. We had an issue in Kyrgyzstan with some kind of corrupt police. 3 days into Kyrgyzstan, we had already been essentially traffic police had already stolen like our passport and taken some money from us and stuff. So it was we were finding out the hard way that it was kind of a slightly corrupt country. But we had some run-in with some police in the city, and we ended up we made a deal early on in the war to not pay bribes and not to pay our way through countries. So we refused to pay people money, and that kind of ended up with us seeing the inside of a jail cell for a few days and the embassy helping to get us out.
I don't think I can imagine. I hope I never have to. You're very calm about that. I'm sure people are listening here and they're freaking out, but that's, you're there and you've lived to tell the story. Now, a lot of the people I talk to really, they do crazy things, which I think is amazing, but at some point, these things have got to be really difficult. So I'm sure you had points, but what was a real, I guess, a challenging point that you really had to fight through? Or was it all just kind of an adventure? I mean, or was there ever a time where you said, all right, I'm going to turn back, I'm going to head to the nearest airport and go home?
Every day at 3 o'clock.
Well, that is honest. Okay, that is really refreshing and honest.
All kind of jokes aside, like it was kind of it was fun when somebody else was walking with you, but I think the hardest part essentially was when I ended up having to go alone. So a year and a half into the war, well, as I said, when my friend decided he wanted to go home, I had to kind of try and make the decision on whether or not I was going to carry on or not, and it kind of came down to the idea that this was something that I wanted to carry on pursuing, even if it was meant on my own. And so I ended up going into winter for the first time on my own, in like -30, into the mountains for the first time on border walk. And so it kind of got quite lonely, and for like a year and a half, it was kind of a lot of anxiety, like depression, and because it was one of those issues where I never really knew where I was going to be sleeping each night. I didn't really have anybody to talk to, and I was kind of alone a lot. So it was kind of one of those, after my friend had left, that was probably the hardest point of border walk, was kind of readjusting and learning to kind of be on my own and do this on my own, rather than having another person with me, beside me, walking with me, literally, like, walking me through it.
Absolutely. I mean, and I guess at the end of the day, I mean, it's refreshing that you would say, okay, like depression kicks in and all of this confusion. What did you do? Yeah. I mean, was it music? Was it, were you listening to things on tape at that point? What does one do to occupy your mind? You know what I mean? Just to keep you going when you're walking that much.
So essentially, originally it was music. So I'd listen to like live albums in the mountains, and it was great. But eventually I kind of get sick and tired of listening to the same music over and over again, because I didn't have any Wi-Fi around, so I couldn't update my playlist, sort of thing. So I ended up, every now and again, when I could get some Wi-Fi, was to download audiobooks that would just keep me going. So I'd listen to audiobooks and podcasts. I found out were a thing when I was on the road as well. So now I carry on listening to podcasts, and I would have to end up staying away from like science-y podcasts, because you'd end up having some sort of like existential crisis of like, what does it all mean? I'm just this rock flying through space and I'm walking across it. And so I'd have to kind of stay away.
I suppose. And how were your friends and family about this? Did they think you were absolutely crazy, or were they pretty supportive?
Yeah. So originally my family were kind of a bit skeptical, as I feel like anybody would be. My family thought I was going to carry on with like higher education and things. And one day we kind of had this sit down, and my dad was like, "Oh, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna carry on with the masters? What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "I think I might give this walking thing a go and see how it pans out."
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone over very well in my house, but cheers to you.
Well, my parents showed some kind of patience with me, and then eventually, when we kind of ended up gaining this kind of momentum, and so we got some large sponsors on board, companies like Sony and Aquapack and things, and they were just like, oh, I think this might actually be a thing that we have to do now. And they got on board and they became like Boardwalk's biggest fans. So they've had some really weird holidays because of it. So my parents have been on holiday in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine.
Hey.
Yeah, so they come out to visit me. They came out to visit me whenever they could. But yeah, it was a strange experience for them, I think, as much as it was for me. Even like giving me phone calls every now and again to see where I am, and like they'd just be at random points in the day giving me a call, and their friends would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just calling my son. He's in Afghanistan."
And by the way, he's walking. Yeah. What was the most surprising place? Like I think we all have preconceptions about certain countries. What really shocked you the most?
Oh, definitely Afghanistan, because I think we're all used to seeing Afghanistan through some sort of lens of like conflict and war. But when I got there, it was a lot more casual I was a lot more comfortable there than I would have thought I would have been. The people there were lovely. I was being helped along the way. Unfortunately, that only did really last for like a week, and then it all kind of went downhill. So I was taken in the middle of the night by something like 7 men with AK-47s, and kind of hustled into a van, and the van drove for like 40 minutes, and the word Taliban was said every now and again. But eventually, after 40 minutes, I got chucked out of this 4x4, and it ended up being a military checkpoint. And ended up having to have a sit down with some generals, and they told me essentially that the Taliban knew of a British national that was walking through the area, so they'd come to get me before the Taliban did. So yeah, it was all perfect for like this week, and I was learning so many things about the country and all these preconceived ideas I had about the country, and then it suddenly went downhill.
And then like scooped and put in a van, so there's that. That's amazing. So what is like the number one or number two things that you would recommend for a traveler to do in a situation? Is it just a smile? Is it friendliness? I mean, what did you learn about going through all of those different cultures? Was there one universal thing that just kind of worked everywhere?
Just essentially, I learned that people are generally 99% of the time good people. There's only a small percentage of people that will end up taking advantage of you, or will be the cause of something going wrong. The majority of the time, people are lovely people that will help you. And I always make this comment about Boardwalk being a journey that's stitched together by thousands of people around the world, because Boardwalk wouldn't have been possible without the people I met every day. Who are either generous with their time, with their money, with their home, with their resources, anything to help Boardwalk carry on going forward. So that's probably one of the major things I learned on the walk. Was I think I began with this kind of skeptical, glass half empty kind of attitude of, oh, here we go again. But through Boardwalk, I kind of like there was some sort of regaining of trust in humanity, that there's like great things are possible, like just with the help of other people.
It's so true. And at the end of the day, how much money did you raise, and how did the project benefit from all of this?
So we were able to raise enough money to provide enough clean water access pumps for up to 400 families.
Wow.
And so now I go around telling the story of Boardwalk to children in schools and stuff, and teach them about clean water access and how important it is, and tell these stories that I learned along the way of people who struggle to find clean water in a place where clean water is abundant. And even before finding out about the charity, it was just never an issue. Like I kind of took everything I had for granted.
Yeah, water is definitely one of those things that until you travel to a place that's so challenged, you cannot possibly appreciate how difficult it is when you don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I thought I knew what being thirsty was, and until you're in the desert about to die, suffering from dysentery, I never knew what actual thirst was.
And how important water, just the basics are to getting back to health And when you don't have it, or when you don't have it for your children, it's just an incredibly, I mean, we thank goodness we can't imagine it, but imagine how many people go through it. Now that you've seen it and been able to help so many people, it's amazing. How did you adjust to life after the walk ended? Are you just like loving sitting in a chair? Like what was like different lifestyle? I mean, how did you adjust? Are you now like a fitness person, or I mean, it's just a different schedule and everything.
Yeah, so I mean, I love the outdoors, but I love the indoors even more now. It's delightful. Just to have four walls and a roof over your head is like something also I took for granted. So I try to spend as much time as inside as I can. But apart from that, it took a while to readjust to like normal life. So I would, I'd walk around like the city and I ended up going for like long walks because I was never making distance anymore. So the average kilometer would be kind of like somewhere between 35 and 40 kilometers a day. And so I would never be making distance. So I'd just go for long walks to the city, on through the city, through like parks and stuff. And I'd always just be on the move. And also, I feel like I was always seeing new places. I was never going to the same place twice. I was just always moving forward. So that kind of took a bit of readjustment to kind of stop, settle, and kind of just exist in a space and not try and plow forward and make distance. So it took a bit of readjusting, but I think I'm back to kind of normal now, I think. I've got some like small things, other things I've got planned to do and things. So I'll keep myself busy in that kind of way.
Yeah, what's next for you? I mean, where do you go after this kind of thing? Are you going to ever continue any of these types of things, or are you just sort of moving into more the speaking space, right? And have you written a book and or a movie?
Yeah, so I am currently writing the book. It's also, I think that's one of the things that's kind of been helping me kind of readjust, is just getting everything on page and like, reading everything through myself and helping me to process it essentially, because I think I felt like I never took the time to kind of process things. It kind of, everything just happened to me and I was kind of chucked through these spaces, especially like Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places I ended up kind of like Kyrgyzstan and jail and things. These things were just happening to me and I was kind of just letting them happen and then just carrying on and not really processing them. So the book's really helping in that kind of regard. So I'm doing speaking in schools and writing the book and planning other smaller adventures and stuff around the kind of idea of water conservation. So here in Melbourne, where I'm currently based, I will be doing a short walk of the Yarra River and kind of exploring the history of the river and the problems surrounding the river, like pollution and things. So yeah.
I was going to say a short walk for you. I thought you were just going to say, I'm just going to walk across Australia, like no big deal, and I'll chat with you after that.
Oh, no, I've done that. It's fine.
Where can people find you if they want to follow your adventures? I mean, are you blogging frequently? Are you tweeting? Where can they find you with your updates?
So for the upcoming walks and stuff, I will be blogging, but you can find me at arjunbhogal.co.uk, and I'm even on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and things. So people can follow along, follow the journey and stuff, and find out a bit about water conservation and clean water access.
Well, this is wonderful. Really appreciate you chatting with me, and your story is incredible. I'm going to watch this back and get even more inspired to like actually go outside and walk down the blocks.
Cheers. Well, thanks for having me.